Fact checkers have screened President Obama's new Obamacare claims. We've got the results. Hours ago in the White House Rose Garden, President Obama claimed his signature legislative achievement has exceeded expectations.
7.1 million Americans have now signed up for private insurance plans through these marketplaces. 7.1.
7.1. But the White House is not saying how many of those people have paid for their coverage, and no enrollment is complete until the first check is cashed. And then there's this.
But the bottom line is this. Under this law, the share of Americans with insurance is up.
Is it really up? Remember, 6 million people lost their coverage last fall, were issued cancellation notices before the administration changed its own rules to try to stem the hemorrhaging. The White House also not saying how many of these signups were people kicked off of their plans thanks to this law. And then there's this.
People got the word out. And we didn't make a hard sell.
Really? That claim is a real head-scratcher. We've seen months of messages, like the infamous Obamacare ad featuring a young man in his pajamas, or the multi-million-dollar ad featuring fitness guru Richard Simmons. And, of course, this parody video that went viral featuring President Obama in a fake interview with comedian Zach Galifianakis. In fact, the marketing budget for Obamacare projected to be at least $684 million. Not a hard sell. I hate to see the soft sell. Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry, live in Washington. Ed?
Good to see you, Megan. I mean, who can forget Pajama Boy? Obviously, a lot of money, as you say, was spent. And we have to note that this was one of the best days the president's had in a long time, because he could at least tout the fact that after an awful start with the website, obviously, they still were able to hit that initial goal of 7 million signups. The problem, of course, as you suggest, is going to be the fine print. You saw the president in the Rose Garden. He was pretty giddy about the fact that they met at least that initial goal. And he was chastising reporters for focusing on bad news, bad stories in recent months. He also went after Republicans for continuing to push repeal of the law. And he sent some shout outs to people like Dick Durbin, Nancy Pelosi, other prominent Democrats, saying that they've stood for the law. And he suggested to them that it's going to be a winner in the midterm elections. But as you suggest, a question is going to be moving forward. Was this a premature victory lap? Because the questions that are going to be answered in the days ahead, a bigger decision day really is going to be that midterm election, not what we saw today with this initial goal. How many people have actually paid their premiums so they actually have insurance? Also, can we believe the 7 million number? Because you'll remember back in October and November, they were saying, oh, look, in order to get accurate numbers, we have to give you monthly numbers because they're just trickling in. Now they're giving us in real time how many people they say are signing up. It's an interesting change. When I asked Jay Carney about that today, he said it's because the technology has gotten better, the website's gotten better, so they can track the data better. We'll see, Megan. How can you turn around these numbers within 24 hours and tell us?
Because our systems have gotten a lot better, which I think anybody who went on healthcare.gov in October and went on it in the last week can attest.
So they say the data is getting better. Obviously, the other big question is going to be, what is the net here? Because there were people who lost their plans. Are they just being moved into the exchanges out of the 7 million people? How many of those people were folks who lost their plans before? How many of those are actually people who are uninsured and are now insured by this, Megan?
That is the key point. Ed, thank you.
Good to see you.
The goal of this law was to insure the uninsured, not to reinsure people who had insurance but got kicked off of insurance thanks to Obamacare. Even before the fact checker started tonight, one of President Obama's former top advisors suggested that those questioning these enrollment claims, well, they must be kind of crazy. Watch.
I suggest that all the, the sort of black helicopter crowd and people who are doubting the numbers and all of that stuff should talk to the insurance industry, because they seem to be bearing out the numbers that the government is reporting.
But is there cause to doubt this administration when it comes to its claims about Obamacare? As you know, the administration has been repeatedly called out for falling short of the truth on this issue. First, the president's now infamous pledge.
If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor, period. If you like your health care plan, you will be able to keep your health care plan, period.
That promise, made repeatedly, became the PolitiFact lie of the year, as we saw more than 6 million people lose their insurance, receive cancellation notices at least, and their doctors in many instances. Then the Washington Post fact-checker challenged the president not once but several times, pointing out that he was repeatedly pumping up enrollment numbers by counting Medicaid enrollees who have to re-enroll each year. Basically, he was saying they were enrolling because of the law, where there was no proof of that whatsoever. And then there's our health secretary and her math challenge.
What does success look like?
Well, I think success looks like at least 7 million people having signed up by the end of March 2014.
First of all, 7 million was not the administration. That was a CBO, Congressional Budget Office prediction when the bill was first signed. I'm not quite sure where they even got their numbers. Their numbers all over the board.
What? 7 million? Who said that was relevant? Those numbers came in part from you, Madam Secretary, and we have the video. And by the way, when the administration announced last week that it was extending the deadline for signups, we didn't even bother to show you this.
Are you going to delay the open enrollment beyond March 31st?
No, sir.
March 31st is the deadline for enrollment. You've heard us make that clear.
Do you anticipate more delays?
No.
Many now saying that there are plenty of reasons to question the latest numbers. Joining me now, Britt Hume, our Fox News senior political analyst. And so, you must be a black helicopter type if you have any doubts about these 7 million numbers, Britt.
Well, Megan, I can certainly see why, if they've got 7 million people signed up, which is a pretty loose standard for the reasons that you and Ed have mentioned, you'd be relieved because it didn't look for a long time like the administration would even make that number. And that's, of course, the number that, as you showed, they announced themselves as what success would look like. But I don't think that it's time for the president or anybody else to be dancing in the end zone. For one thing, these numbers, for reasons you've pointed out, are nothing to dance about, and this ain't the end zone. What will matter, of course, in the end is not only how many people sign up and pay and actually acquire insurance, but how satisfied they are with it compared to what they had before. There are going to be some winners, Megan. There are going to be people who get subsidies that enable them to purchase insurance that they couldn't previously afford, and those people will doubtless be satisfied. But obviously, there are going to be a great many millions of others who, and we've heard so much anecdotal evidence from people who talk about they lost their doctor, they lost their hospital, they're paying higher deductibles, they're paying higher premiums, and all the rest of it. And that kind of dissatisfaction with something that the government, and indeed one party of the government, did, is the kind of thing that really does drive voting.
You mentioned the subsidies. A lot of the people getting those subsidies were previously paying for their own insurance and happy just doing just that. So, I mean, some of these numbers are people who are sort of forced onto, in part, government help that they never asked for and didn't necessarily want. It's just one of the many questions that people have about these numbers and what they are really made up of. But let me ask you this. The tone that the president struck today as he was sort of touting his 7 million number, granted, an achievement for the administration, but did he strike the right tone?
Well, it's sort of understandable, but I always think that when a president gets up and cites something that for a myriad of reasons we all know is only part of the story, if that it reflects badly on the president, and it doesn't look credible, and it looks sort of childish or churlish or both. And my sense about this is that what does this say to all the people who are sitting out there tonight who have either lost their insurance and not been able to get any under Obamacare, or who have bought policies and had to pay more for policies that, in their view, are worse than the ones they had before? I mean, there are millions of people in that predicament from all that we know. How are they going to look at this? Is this going to make them say, oh, boy, I want to go vote Democrat in the fall?